Hello guys and welcome to our second video lecture. This one is going to be over the 5 themes of geography, which you guys should be familiar with. It's the spice chart, but what I'm going to go over today are kind of different things that fit into each of the themes. So this is going to give you we're going to examine broader themes throughout each period, but also this will help you facilitate comparisons and also aid in understanding information and components of a broader framework. So we're going to kind of dive into a lot of different things today. But we're going to start with the first theme, which is the development and transformation of social structures, which is a process in which people and groups work together to advance in their society. So there's a number of components here, but we're going to start with gender roles and relations. So a patriarchal society, and I'll guide you guys over to this picture over here. A patriarchal society, a society dominated by males, or a social system where the males hold a majority of the power. They're the political leaders, they control the property, and things like that. An example of this would be in Afghanistan or Yemen. In Afghanistan, women can be thrown in jail for leaving their husbands. And in Yemen, women still have a hard time having access to education, and it's not equal. So, even in countries where they're not a patriarchal society anymore, but they used to be, and women have equal rights now, still a lot of those elements kind of still bleed into today's society and cause still for women to still be oppressed in some ways. A matriarchal society, as you might guess, is a society dominated by females, so a social system where females hold the power. Matriarchal systems are kind of more few and far between. There's not as many, but for example, there's one in Bribri, Costa Rica, where the women really have control of this small community and society. Next is family and kinship. So what I mean by family choice is choosing to pick someone as your family. So that would be when you get married and you're picking someone and making them part of your family. As far as kinship goes, kinship means blood-to-blood relationship. So that's like this family tree over here. Your blood relatives are going to be your mom and dad, your cousins, your siblings, your aunt and uncle, your kids one day, your nieces and nephews. These people are all your kin. Next is racial, ethnic, and gender constructions. What I want you guys to think about for this part is how are all of these things kind of related? So Jim Crow laws, as some of you might know, were laws in the U.S. that enforced racial segregation in the South between the end of Reconstruction in 1877 and the beginning of the Civil Rights Movement in the 1950s. So basically this made segregation legal in the U.S. in the South during this time. Apartheid, kind of a similar idea. Apartheid literally means apartness in Afrikaans, which was a system of racial segregation in the south and southwest part of Africa from 1948 to the early 1990s. And then the Don't Ask, Don't Tell was definitely a more recent one, but it was a U.S. policy on military service for gay men, bisexual individuals, and lesbians under the Clinton administration, and it meant that applicants were not to be asked about their sexual orientation. So as far as these things being related, what I want you to think about is that it was a segregation of a group that was already marginalized and already oppressed. And then last for this one is social and economic classes. So a feudal system is where landowners provide land to tenants in exchange for loyalty and service. And this flourished in kind of medieval Europe in the 9th and 15th century, so quite a long time ago. And the caste system is a Hindu social and religious hierarchy, but basically what it meant is that your caste was determined at birth, and that is what channeled you into your occupation. And then so at the top of the caste system was usually priests and religious scholars. And then for the manor system, and you guys will learn more about this in 8th grade history, but it was a way for feudal lords to organize their lands and produce agricultural goods. So theme number 2 is political, so state building, expansion, and conflict. So 3 different political structures or form of governance. We have democracy, dictatorship, and monarchy. Democracy is what we have here in the U.S., and it's where the people have the authority to choose their governing legislation. And then for dictatorship, is when a government is characterized or controlled by a single leader or a group of leaders. So think of, Hitler during World War II and kind of the control he had on the media and just control in general. And then a monarchy is ruled by a king or queen or emperor, and they are considered the head of state. And they are the head of state for life until abdication, which means, abandoning the throne, or if they are killed or die naturally and things like that. That's the only way they are relieved of that position. A monarchy or a monarch can be symbolic, or they may have legitimate authority. So for England, an example, the Queen is the monarch, but she doesn't really have that legislative power. Most of those decisions are made by Parliament, or I think pretty much all of the decisions are made by Parliament. For empires, so a series of states that are controlled by one single leader, usually called an emperor. So for example, the Ottoman Empire, which controlled much of Southeast Europe, Western Asia, and North Africa in the 14th and earliest 20th centuries. We have nations versus nation and nationalism. A nation is made up of many states, and they work together to keep their nation running. And then what kind of goes with that is nationalism, which is a belief that one's country is their number one priority. And then we have kind of the opposite of that, which is, a revolt, which happens when a group is unhappy with their certain rules or leaders and they decide to fight back. So there are a lot of slave revolts and different rebellions and things like that. And then revolutions occur when a group of people overthrow a government. So, for example, the American Revolution. And then last little section here, regional, transgressional, and global structures and organizations. So regional is, similar characteristics inside a country or state. Transgressional is outside of that country or state. And then global, it encompasses kind of the whole world. So that's themes on for political. Theme number 3 is interaction with the environment, which is a repeat from Mr. Help in our 5 themes of geography. So this should feel pretty familiar for you guys. But so demography is the study of births, deaths, and income or disease on a human population. So that's kind of referring to this picture over here. Migration is the movement of people from one place to another because they're looking for work, or something happened where they were before and they were kind of forced to leave. And then patterns of settlement, basically the way in which buildings and houses are distributed in a certain area. And then technology, which can range from small devices to big machines that can make jobs easier. So that's our interaction with environment. So a little different than Mr. Help, but very much the same ideas, but a few different components. Theme number 4, so culture, or development and interaction of cultures. There's a lot to talk about this one, and I'm really just scratching the surface. I don't want you guys to feel like you have to know everything about Islam or Buddhism, but I do think it's important to talk about, and so when we do talk about different cultures, you guys kind of have a little bit of background knowledge. So for Islam, which is a monotheistic religion regarded as, or revealed through Muhammad as the prophet of Allah, followers are known as Muslims, and it's the second largest religion in the world. Buddhism kind of is based on a variety of traditions, beliefs, and spiritual practices, and is largely based on the teachings of Buddha. Hinduism is an Indian religion, or often referred to as a way of life, and they worship the Brahman, but they do also acknowledge other gods and goddesses. Christianity, which you guys, I'm assuming, would probably be the most familiar with, but it is the world's largest religion and is based on the teachings of Jesus. And then last is Judaism. So it's a cultural tradition of the ancient Hebrews and their beliefs in one God and teachings of the Torah. So those are kind of the religions. Obviously, there's plenty more. There's tons of religions, but those are just kind of the major ones that I wanted to talk about today. And then for belief systems, philosophies, and ideologies. Taoism is a Chinese philosophy which advocates for humility and religious piety. So if you've ever seen the yin and yang sign, which is the black and white circle, that's kind of the symbol for Taoism. And then egalitarianism is a doctrine that all people are created equal. All people deserve equal rights and opportunities. Science and technology, this is kind of talking about how Darwinism, eugenics, and printing press, how things like this kind of develop cultures or influence different cultures. So Darwinism is the theory of evolution, which talks about kind of the development through natural selection. Eugenics is the beliefs or practices that aim to improve the genetic quality of human population. So trying to get the most desirable genetics. And then the printing press kind of seems weird to fit in here, but it kind of revolutionized society, and it was created in China, but it was a way for us to have mass production of information, so books and newspapers and pamphlets. So it really advanced our society. And then last, and obviously a very important part of culture, is art and architecture. So the ways people entertain themselves in pop culture, so that's anywhere from food to stories to dance, music, images, all of these things. Those of you who have traveled, you know that architecture looks very different in Europe as it does to Asia, as it does to the United States. Architecture is vastly different between different cultures. And then our last slide for today is about economic systems. So the creation, expansion, and interaction of economic systems. So we have agriculture and pastoral production. Agriculture referring to crops, and pastoral referring to livestock, meaning cows and things like that. Then we have trade and commerce. Trade is the buying and selling small quantities of products, and commerce is large quantities of products. Labor systems, a forced labor camp, again kind of referring to World War II, but a work camp where inmates are forced to do labor as a form of punishment. So the concentration camps of World War II, where the Jewish people were forced to do labor, and their crime was just the fact that they were Jewish. So that's an example of a forced labor camp. Slavery is when a person is enslaved, forced to work, and not allowed to leave. They are considered property of their slave owner. Indentured servitude was kind of a contract between two people where the person would come to the U.S. and work there for about 7 years. They wouldn't work for money, but their pay was free transportation into America. And then a free market system is based on supply and demand with little to no government control. Industrialization is when we moved from agriculture to manufacturing. So we went away from planting crops and producing livestock. That doesn't mean that they weren't still, that those things didn't still exist, but that's just kind of when our economy shifted to more manufacturing and having factories and didn't only depend on agriculture. And then the last few things,